Hey guys, it's Lucas and Esther. We are going through this Sunday's Bible Study for Life Kids topic. It is another week that's talking about the provision of God. Last week we talked about Noah, and this week that we're prepping for is for October the 13th, 2019, and this is going to be the story of Abraham and Sarah, and we're going to be talking about the way that God provided for them and how God keeps his promises. Esther's going to go over our points of biblical learning here in just a second, but our main point that we're going to take out of this, the life point, as they call it, is that God can do things that no one else can do.
That's true. So this week, as we're talking about Abraham and Sarah, the level of biblical learning for the kids is that God has concern and care for all people. Our scripture references, again, like last week, there's a lot of scripture that's being kind of brought together in this one verse or this one morning. So these parts are going to come from Genesis 12, from chapter 15, from chapter 17, from 18, and from 21. So rather than reading all of that, we're just going to kind of summarize that story for you teachers, and then we'll go over the whole plan for this Sunday morning.
Yeah. Our unit verse is we're still in Acts, so it's Acts 13, 32 through 33 Alpha, and it says, "We ourselves proclaim to you the good news of the promise that was made to our ancestors, that God has fulfilled this for us." And of course the fulfillment, as always, is Jesus, and we want to make sure, like we do every week, that we're really directing our kids to the fact that Jesus is the fulfillment of all of these promises, all the way from the Old Testament to today, that the fulfillment of the promises that God made to his people was and has always been Christ.
Amen. Yeah. So this Sunday we are going to be talking about Abraham and Sarah. And maybe since we're not going to go through the full overview of all those chapters, what if we just read the story from here?
Yeah, let's just read the story in the card, and then there's some key points and some things that we really want to hit on so that you guys have a bit of an understanding about why certain things happen the way that they did.
All right, so this says, God told Abram, be sure that you don't confuse that, because it's important that we know.
The names are about to change.
Yeah, it's important that we know that God is the one who changed their names. So God told Abram to leave his father's house and to go to the place God would show him. God said he would increase Abram's descendants to the size of a great nation and make his name great. God said all people on the earth would be blessed through Abram. And one thing it's important to teach the kids about here is that a person's wealth used to be in a large part dependent upon how many children they had. And for a woman, her value to society was based on whether or not she could birth children. So if you had a lot of kids, you were kind of considered wealthy, and if you didn't, then even if you had a lot of animals, especially if you were a lady, you were pretty much not worth much, unfortunately.
So what's her name here? Sarai was kind of the cat lady of the Old Testament. Is that what you're saying?
Well, she did have a husband, so he might have limited the number of felines, but essentially she was not highly regarded.
Old Testament cat lady.
Abram and his wife Sarai obeyed God. When Abram was 99 years old, even older than you, Lucas.
Almost 100.
God appeared to him in a vision and said, "Do not be afraid. I am your shield, and your reward will be very great." Abram was confused because he and Sarai did not have any children and were too old to have children. God took Abram outside and said, "Look at the sky and count the stars if you can. Your family will outnumber the stars." God also promised that Abram's family would keep the land they were living in. Many years passed, and Abram and Sarai still did not have any children. Once again, God appeared to Abram. He changed Abram's name to Abraham, which means father of a great multitude. God said that Abraham would be the father of many nations and kings. God also changed Sarai's name to Sarah, which means princess. God said, "I will bless her and give her a son." Abraham laughed to himself. How can a child be born to a man who is 100 years old and to a woman who is 90? But God said, "In 1 year Sarah will have a son, and you will name him Isaac. I will make my covenant with him and his family." God kept his promise. A year later, Sarah gave birth to a son. Abraham named his son Isaac, just as God had told him to do.
He's a smart guy. doing what God told her to do. Now, in the midst of that, there are some epic mistakes that happen.
There are.
But this lesson is not really focusing in on any of those.
It's true.
We're looking primarily at God's provisions, namely that He did what He said He was going to do whenever He gave Abraham and Isaac. Well, whenever He gave Abraham Isaac,
Yes.
right? And when He gave Abraham and Sarah the son that they had wanted. Some things, especially in chapter 15, really jump out. And one is the way that this covenant was made between God and Abraham. Now, one of the things that they would do is they would take the animals and they would cut them, and they would take some big mammals and then some small fowl, doves or sometimes pigeons. It kind of just depended on what the significance of the covenant was. And then they would cut them in half in order to, show that whatever was done to these animals, let it be done unto me if, I break this agreement that we have. And this is the exact same way that God makes His covenant with Abraham. And what's so interesting to me about that is that God does stuff, even though He's God, He does things oftentimes in ways that we understand them, even though we should just accept them the way they are as God's promises, right?
I think it's so cool as I've studied through the Bible and just seen God in my life. He works with me in ways that I can understand. Even though He is beyond time and space, He works in the confines of where I understand. And for Abram, at that time, the way that they would divide property lines or make any kind of an agreement between people was just like you said. They would, for instance, if we were dividing New York from New Jersey, we might use pigeons.
Right. Exactly. Texas from Oklahoma, big beefs.
Sure, yes. So in that setting, you would use what you had. You'd cut that animal in half. So when God told Abram, go get an animal and offer it to me, I always wondered, why in the world did He cut that thing in half? God didn't tell him to do that. But as I studied deeper, I learned that that's the way that they would make an agreement. So, and then for God to be the one to have walked between those divided pieces of the animal, that signified that God was saying, it'll be to me like it is to this animal. My flesh will be torn if I break my covenant with you. And then what's so beautiful about that is that if you flash forward, we see that even though God never broke His covenant, He allowed His body to be broken because we broke the covenant. And He still made it right for us. So, yeah, He's awesome. We love Him.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So that is the main gist of our story. And since we read it off the story card today, we'll just go ahead and jump into our Sunday school lesson. So our game, Pastor Lucas, this Sunday, as in every Sunday, we are going to start off with a game.
Yes.
Because it's fun to be at church. And that's really one of the key things we want kids to remember, is that when they think about church, we want them to go, they really like me at that place. That's my place. We want there to just be all sorts of positive connotations for them being here with us. So what we're going to do, first of all, is play a game of counting things.
Okay.
So what that looks like is we're all going to stand in a circle together, and teacher, you're going to start off this game. You're going to look around the room and find something that you can count. It might be shoes, or it might be children, or start off with something kind of obvious, okay? So you'll look around and you'll say the number is 12. And then the kids have to guess what it was that you counted.
Oh, okay.
And then whoever guesses right gets to go next. So you'll pass that game around a little bit, and the main point we're getting to with that game is that God is going to tell Abraham a number of things that he cannot count, the number of stars in the sky.
Right.
So we'll talk about all these things that we can count, and then what's something we can't count. It's too big a number. So that's kind of the meat that we're getting to in that game. And then once you've got their attention and they're kind of excited about listening to you, then you're going to go into story room and you'll read this story that we just covered. And there are some fun little review question cards today.
Nice.
Or for this Sunday. You want to go over some of those?
Let's do that. Who made a covenant with Abraham?
God.
Who always keeps his promises?
God.
Who changed Abram's name?
God.
Who can count to 10?
Lucas can.
Yeah, also God. I feel like most of these are, who can name family members?
Hopefully everyone in the family.
Who told Abraham and Sarah they would have a son?
God did.
Who might break a promise? That's not a God
Not
answer.
God.
Yeah. Who can do things so we've got one in particular that would be not God, but the rest of our 9 out of 10 questions are answered to God.
So
okay,
these will be
so that's pretty cool.
These will be cut up in a bag, and you can have the kids draw a question out, and they can all shout out the answers together, just to kind of help with comprehension of the story. And then, of course, as always, there are some review questions right here that you can go over with the children, and those will be similar to the kind of questions that Pastor Lucas is going to ask them in our Kids Corner coming up. So you'll go over the story with the children, you'll go over these questions, make sure they really understand everything, and then we're going to transition, while we're still in that story room, into our missionary talk. So we always, once we understand that new truth about God, and for this week, again, that's that God can do things that no one else can do. So once we really understand that, then we want to talk about how that applies to people in other parts of the world. So getting them to think locally, but then also globally.
Yeah.
So this session in Unit 2, we're visiting with our missionary in Seville, Spain.
Right.
And his name is Abraham. So
Nice. Good little tie-in there.
there you go. So this Sunday we're going to watch a video about Abraham in Spain, and then we're going to talk a little bit about something involving that Spanish culture each week. And this week it's about tapas. So tapas
Tiny
are
little Spanish foods.
Yes.
They
and-
are not quite as filling as their name might suggest.
Oh, that is disappointing.
It's so sad.
Yeah. So we are going to have our snack tapas style when we come back from Kids Corner. So
Oh, nice.
we'll have like little plates of a small little conglomeration of things, a few little cheeses and crackers and stuff like that on their plates.
Right on. You know, that was how I learned what the exchange rate was whenever I was in Spain.
Oh,
Yeah, I had enough tapas to where I was satisfied eating, and then realized that the dollar versus the euro was not in our favor. It was a very, very sad and eye-opening experience while being in a foreign
that
country.
was a hard way to learn that lesson.
Yes, it was.
Young men tend to be hungry.
Mm-hmm.
So then once we have talked about that, about Spain and tapas and hungry people, then we will go over our Bible verses. And again, that's going to be, this unit verse is from Acts 13:32, and you have that big poster back there. So if you haven't already done this, I encourage you to come up with some hand signals with the kids and help them learn that. As always, we do have jelly beans to motivate young ones.
Such a savory reward.
And then we have a Bible game that we are going to use to fill in any time. So we usually go from our Sunday school hour down the hall to Big Church at about 10:45. If you get to the end of all your other story time and missionary talk time, then what I'd encourage you to do is have the kids each grab a Bible. We have a great big stack of them in the back. We've got our little Bible cards. And then either you or one of the children can draw a card out of this baggie, and everybody has to race to find the book of Exodus.
Oh, cool.
And then we have a race to find the book of Amos. Ooh,
Yeah. Or
minor
Malachi.
Malachi. What a great story. And then we will quietly come down the hall, sit on the front row, and join the whole church for a song, and Pastor Lucas is going to go over some, what do you call that?
Bible review. We'll head into Kids Corner.
Yeah, Kids Corner. There's a thing you do before, though.
Announcements.
That's
Announcements.
it.
Yeah. So when the kids come down to Big Church, we are going to, I'll set up, do announcements. We'll do a song, like you said, and then we'll do our Kids Corner. And in Kids Corner, essentially what I do, I ask the kids, hey, what'd you learn in Sunday school this morning? Some of our kids, like we found out last week, will not have been here for Sunday school, so we might get some wide-eyed stares, but for the most part, our kids who are really great at answering questions really directly and knowing what's going on. And part of the reason that is the case is because you guys do such a great job of equipping them. The questions that I'll be asking you have to do essentially with everything that's on that right side. They're not going to get anything that they didn't learn about or was asked about in Sunday school. So we'll talk about, why did God tell Abram to count? Who can count the number of stars in the sky? Those kind of things, the exact questions that we went over with earlier. After that, I'll pray for the kiddos. They'll stand up and head out, and our service will do our meet and greet time, and you guys will head back to Children's Church.
Yes, sir. So once we get back down the hall, we are going to kind of reorient the group again with another game. We oftentimes do, as you just said, get some new kids in Big Church Hour, so we want to be sure that they have the same kind of warm welcome that the other kids did. So for our game this time, we are going to start off with making some stars out of clothespins.
Okay.
We're going to give this a try here together.
Oh, fantastic.
Theoretically,
I love theories.
right? Who doesn't? We should be able to take 5 clothespins and make a star.
Okay.
So go ahead. You got this.
Done.
Done, done, done. Beautiful job. I don't know if you can see this, ladies and gentlemen, but it's
Am I supposed to
it's
make
pretty
it with
amazing.
the clothespins attached?
well, I don't know. I mean, you can do it your way, I guess.
Because I wasn't gonna.
Have you had enough tapas to eat today?
No, there's not enough tapas in the world. Oh man.
So
Okay, so this is actually more difficult than it sounds.
well, so we're gonna play with this for a while and try not to cause any serious injuries while we do that. But basically, we are gonna make clothespin stars, and the kids might ask you, "Why are we making stars?" And you'll say, "What a great question." We are going to hear today about a time when God told us that he could count the stars. So once we have played clothespin star game for a little while,
Yeah, you keep going. I got this.
I trust that you do. So then we are going to head into our story room, and teachers, you're going to have the video queued up so that you can play the video that will recap our Bible story. Again, that's going to be exactly the same words that you read during Sunday school hour, but for those kids who didn't hear it before, they'll get to hear it now. So it'll go through our Bible story, and then you're going to have the little video where we catch up with our heroine of this season, Alexandria Halazandria at Mooseberry Academy, and we will see what kind of exploits she is involved in this week.
Are stars like snowflakes that no two ones look the same?
I think you're probably right. Let's continue this experiment as we.
You keep going. Keep them informed. I got this.
Yeah, here's even more.
That is not what I need.
So then once you're done with the main video and the Alexandria story, then you are going to recap this lesson for any kids who weren't there. For those kids who were there, they can kind of help you with the details of the story a little bit. And then once you feel like everybody understands that, and we've had our little tapas snack during our video time, then you are going to divide your group of kids up into 2 bunches. One group is going to go play a game. Maybe you start with the ones who are still working on stars.
There might be a few.
There may be some. So one group is going to go work on games, and the other group is going to work on a craft. And I'm going to start off showing you this craft first because the game is a little complicated and you might want your fullest attention on it by then.
Yeah, sure.
So these are the little stars we're going to make. They are pretty cute. So we've got some example star shapes out that are cut out for you already. The kids are going to trace those stars onto a piece of paper that's folded in half. When they cut it out, it'll give them 2 stars. They're going to glue some crepe paper in the middle and then use a hole puncher and tie a knot. And that's to remind us that God knows exactly how many stars there are and he keeps his promises. So that's the craft. And then, are you ready to hear about the game?
Almost.
Okay,
Let's
I'll
do
go
it.
ahead. So in the game section, you are going to have a long piece of rope, and you'll have 2 children who are standing at either end. Ooh, may I?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're going to have 2 little children represented by these 2 clothespins. They are going to stand at either end of your long loop of rope to cause a shape like this. See the shape? Yeah, so a child here, and then a third child has to follow one of these series of instructions where they start off at one end with their feet in, and then they jump and put their feet out, and then feet on either side of one end, feet on either side of the other end, whoop, on the lines, in the middle, back out. Or they can choose this other method where there's some turning around backwards, and so they have to try to follow the prescription exactly. And the thing to focus on here with this game, for one, it's just fun. But for two, is that God walked between the two pieces of the animal, and he kept his promises. So that is the game, and you can have the kids rotate through so that everybody gets a turn to be on the inside and do the jumping. And then when you're done with one station, the kids will rotate through to the other. So when the children are being picked up by their parents or guardians, they should be in the craft and game stations. And then we will, when they're picked up, we will be giving them these little tear-off sheets. And these go over the story. And then on the other side, they have some age-appropriate activities for the kids. And on these story side, there is some little daily Bible reading that the kids can go over with their parents, and I'd have you encourage parents when they're picking up their children to do that with their kiddos. And then we want to be sure that every week the kids hear very clearly the gospel presentation, which for us we use the ABCs, which is admit that we're sinners and we've done things wrong, and then believe that Jesus paid the price for our sins when he died on the cross and came back to life, and then see that we choose to follow him every day and make him the Lord of our life. Got anything to add?
I've almost done it. No, even Pinterest has very bad ideas on how to make stars out of clothespins.
Is that, I didn't want to draw attention to your searching, but
it's harder than you think.
So I think that's all we have for you guys for this week.
You're welcome.
Good luck on making stars with clothespins.
I'm going to figure this out.
I'm sure you will. We'll see you guys soon.
Bye, y'all.